Good evening, and welcome to Oh Say Can You See, the unrehearsed bi-weekly live call-in show of SEE, S-E-E, the Society for Economic Equality. We come to you on the first, third, and when there is one, the fifth Wednesday of each month, with programs on topics that matter to working people, like jobs, prices, wages, health care, the crime control business, poverty, and welfare. And we talk about these things from the point of view of working people, not the capitalist class and their political and media stooges. Members of the Society for Economic Equality believe that capitalism, or so-called free enterprise, is unfair and exploitive. Millions of people work at low pay in order to make a few people rich. Members of SEE believe that it's important for the future of our people and our country to understand what the profit system is doing to us and to consider the alternatives. Tonight, our subject is the condition of the working class in 1977. On the panel are Eunice Hayes, to my immediate left, Margot Channing, to my immediate right, Melanie McDermott, far right, and Mark Zapotowski, to the left here. My name is Frank Girard. All of us are members of the working class, and that brings up a problem. Just exactly who are the working class? We would argue that there are basically two economic classes. One is a class of people who own and control the means of production. At most, they number less than 10% of the population. They are the capitalist class. They don't have to get jobs to earn a living. That's how you can tell them from other people. They live off their capital, which is to say they live off the labor of working people. The working class are those who have to find a job, to rent themselves out by the hour in order to get money to support themselves and their families. If you're in the capitalist class, you have it made. If you're in the working class, you may have some real problems. We'll be looking at some of these problems tonight in this program on the condition of the working class. Among our topics are wages, unions, workplace safety, part-time work, temporary work, and others. As I mentioned before, this is a live call-in show. The phone number is 459-4881, and we'll be opening the phone lines for your calls at about 8:20. And we're going to start out by, we have a bunch of topics and a rather general question. The question is, what changes in management strategy confront workers in the 1997 workplace? And one of the topics we might consider is teamwork. I wonder if any of you have anything to say on this subject of teams and the idea of creating a different kind of a workplace situation where people who do the work regard themselves as a team, and they're guided to some extent, but basically they manage themselves. This is the main idea. Any of you have anything on this concept at all of teamwork?
I do. That's currently the way I am working in the job that I'm doing right now. I work in a team, and it seems to be working out very well. The only problems I find with the teamwork concept is that when it comes time for promotions or raises or bonuses or things of that nature, in other words, monetary compensation, these monetary compensations and rewards are still given out on an individual basis. So it's kind of puzzling. You know, you work in a team, but yet you get individually rewarded. I find it very baffling at times.
Well, the whole idea of team working, it seemed like its peak of being promoted as something that was oncoming and a real great idea, you know, about 6 or 7 years ago, it seems, was that, well, we're going to get rid of, you know, layers of the business bureaucracy. We're going to de-layer. We're going to get rid of middle management, and we're going to have, you know, these people, you know, in a less supervised sort of environment who are going to, you know, be able to be more creative, and, you know, that will be much more efficient was the idea. And although it would involve a higher workload, it was being said that, you know, that there was this carrot that, you know, would be in the offing as soon as things settled down. People would have, you know, greater rewards. They called it gain sharing. You know, the gains that would be made by this greater efficiency would be shared among the team working workers. But you know, in reality, the stick is what people have gotten, and the carrot has never really emerged. And we're now 6, 7 years, you know, or even a decade or more into this thing, and people have forgotten that there was supposed to be this shared reward involved. And really, it comes down to this formula, I think, which has been guiding business thought, you know, for, you know, pretty much, you know, seemingly maybe 20 years now, going back to a British fellow by the name of Charles Handy, who's being described as, you know, a great business guru and a social philosopher of, you know, high stature. But that formula is that you take your workforce and you divide it by 2, so you cut it in half, and then you add to that twice the workload, and you end up with 3 times the profits. And I would say that this formula basically, in a nutshell, describes exactly what the working classes are facing. Even the most, you know, supposedly the most favored and precious portion of the working class, maybe even especially, is facing this. The so-called information workers, the people who are using, as Handy says, the clever machines, the clever people with the clever machines, the people that become your shrunken down core workforce that's so precious to you, they're like gold. Nonetheless, you're working them twice as hard. And you know, other people like Welch, that we may hear about in American, I believe, says that, well, if they burn out, they're replaceable parts anyway, given that another part of this picture is an ever-increasing level of job insecurity. Yeah, I mean, when you delayer, you're throwing people out of your core. You're throwing them into that workforce that's very precarious, you know, the people who have no benefits, the people who have a declining, you know, even perhaps a more swiftly declining standard of living. Anyway.
I noted that the people that got delayered in middle management, though, often went to subsidiaries. So they actually became managers in other flat organizations. So in a way, the benefits still keep accruing to the top part of the either the work structure or the social structure, and not coming to the worker.
I think that's
the subsidiary that you really heard they got laid off, but I read a fact that 73%, a larger percentage of middle managers and upper managers laid off, got rehired during these last. The Census Bureau knows this by what they interviewed people about.
But they're outside of
but they're
the core.
They may be in another country working now, but at least they still have a job, or they may be traveling, like some of the people we've talked to do.
Importantly, what you're saying is that the benefits, well, and we can see this by this extreme rise in CEO pay, among Americans at least, you know, where, you know, an American is making 184 times, you know, what a CEO is making 184 times what the average worker, you know, in the corporation is making, compared to 30 years ago, where that was only 16 times as much. And of course, in Europe and in Japan, right now it's still only 30 times as much. So you kind of see where the greater efficiency, the profits from greater efficiency are going.
Anybody else?
Yeah, the companies, Mark, that I'm familiar with and that I have been tracking, frankly, in reality, I do not see a flattening of their organizational structure, which is hierarchical, of course. I do not see that. I read about it in technical journals, that is supposedly what's happening, but I don't see that we are losing layers of management. In fact, sometimes I see another layer of management created even in addition. So we're fattening the layers of managers.
That could be that they're having smaller groups of people reporting to them too, though, I've heard, so that maybe you're spreading them out, but they still exist in the organization.
Well,
you
that
know, that
could
maybe
be.
they don't, and so their power will now come from their knowledge, it said, and how much they contribute to the organization's profits, rather than how many people that report to them. So they're still there in the organization.
We're just getting a little bit more granular, in
Yeah,
other words.
right.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about the word team is it suggests that you're all working for the same purpose. You know, you all have the same purpose, and that is, you know, well, what is it indeed?
Oh, to make
Well, it
the
isn't.
company
The vision.
profitable.
Maximize
That's why we
profit.
work, of
But
course.
there are other tactical strategies involved with creating a team, and one of those is to create a constant state of crisis and flux. And people do bond together in states of crisis, and so the team becomes an entity that does probably feel like they have more power and autonomy. And that's good. I think that there is some positive to that, giving the team more power. But I think what people do is start identifying with the team, and to the point where they rely on the team for their social needs, and they tend to work extra, skip lunches, because of this sense of crisis that the team is all rallying around, and start ignoring their own needs on a physical and emotional level, and that's where the burnout comes in. And you can talk to anybody nowadays in any kind of corporation or organization that has been downsized, and a common complaint is burnout and just extreme tiredness and working too hard.
I think this is really key. You know, this burnout, this pressure. I mean, when you're doing twice the workload with half the number of people, I mean, you can see where that's coming from. And there's this one of these prominent business authors. His name's Welch. He wrote
Jack Welch of GE.
Jack Welch. He
Still the president of GE. I
Yes,
believe.
CEO.
He conducted a revolution of GE, and he wrote a book that he describes as a handbook for business revolutionaries. And it seems that in there, one of his key points is that, you know, the new tough, savvy CEO rules through, squeezes out greater efficiency by operating the company in a state of permanent crisis. You put the people in a state of crisis and you get the best performance out of them. But, you know, one crisis is always leading to another crisis. The key idea is to keep people off balance with change, continuous reorganizing, continuous reshuffling, so that you get people who produce more than they otherwise would, because they're constantly acting as if they're operating, you know, as if their lives depended on it.
Slightly off balance, huh?
And it's kind of exploiting the decency of people, because when you work with people every day, you care about them and you share your lives, and you know, people will want to help each other on a daily basis with stress and crisis and overwork.
Well, one of my sons worked in a furniture factory and was on a team. And they were using the team concept, and he said that there were really a lot of bad things about it, because what would happen was that people would get on those members of the team that they felt weren't doing the job properly or weren't working hard enough, and so you had people snitching to the bosses about how so-and-so was letting down the team and that sort of thing. That strikes me as being a real negative. You know, there's something else about it. You know, I guess I've never had any trouble myself with the curse of identifying myself with my boss. But I think that, you know, just like prisoners begin to identify themselves with their prison, with the guards, and they identify themselves with bosses and authority figures, and with an organization that is exploitive. Can you imagine a slave identifying himself with the slave master or or the field master or whoever it is.
The condemned criminal with the executioner.
Learning to love the hand that wields the whip.
Or that's
You know,
like that
that's the
hostage.
problem I have with this whole thing.
It definitely is a psychological phenomenon that does happen.
Yeah, like this is the only place where you'll be safe, which is sort of what companies are saying. The workforce is unpredictable out there, but as long as you still have a job here, you're safe. But do
Right.
whatever I want. It is a psychological
The
thing. I'm
strange thing
afraid.
about it is that these workforces, even these core workforces of management functions in corporations, are always, as they become more efficient, which is what they're going for, they're continually whittling them down. So as one succeeds, one is undermining one's position, moving oneself further and further towards the burnout level.
Well, when you
this is
mention that,
insane, really.
could I just add that the theorists that promoted quality of work life, I went back to some of them, including books that referred to what Jack Welch did at GE, and they all said you had to have employee job security and you had to have a good reward system for workers. So I'm shocked that these same people who recommended that as part of the whole have not spoken up and said, why is this missing now? It's almost like companies must be gleeful that we did part of what they said and it increased the workers' productivity, but we didn't have to do the other part, which was to pay people part of the gain sharing that they recommended. So
And
I'm
in
sort of
fact,
at the point of blaming the consultants. I'm ready to scream at some of them in the mail and say, are you totally amoral that you wouldn't point out that they've left out and that's why this income inequality is starting to get worse and worse, because the system's changed, the organization has changed, and the reward system is non-existent, basically.
If we don't do this now, we won't do it.
All right.
We have some announcements. The Society for Economic Equality has other activities going besides this program, and if I don't read the announcements now, they'll never get read. So this is the time. Our next OSAE Can You See show will come to you 2 weeks from today, Wednesday, November 19th, at the usual time, 8 p.m. The topic, I think, it will be a continuation of this program, won't it, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, continuing on the condition of the working class in 1997. C, the Society for Economic Equality sponsors other activities besides OSAE Can You See. We have 2 open discussion meetings each week. On Monday evenings from 7 to 8 p.m., we meet at the headquarters of IGE, the Institute for Global Education, at 1400B Lake Drive, southeast behind the Pizza Hut, where we usually talk about a magazine article or other reading that we Xerox for participants. If you're interested, give us a call at 453-0305. On Fridays, for an informal discussion of anything that is on our minds, we meet from 12 noon to 2 p.m. at the Common Ground Coffee House at 1319 East Fulton Street, just east of Fuller Avenue. Everyone's welcome to drop in and sample any of these meetings. C is presenting a series of video movies on the first Friday of the month at 7:30 p.m. The location has been returned to the IGE office at 1400B Lake Drive, southeast behind the Pizza Hut. The next first Friday is day after tomorrow, November 7th. Our video is a 1-hour documentary on advertising, the ad and the ego. Check the Grand Rapids Press tomorrow or Friday for a review by John Douglas. We hope to see you there. Admission is free and you're invited to remain for an informal discussion after the show. For a free copy of an introductory brochure that explains the purpose and activities of the Society for Economic Equality, write to C at Post Office Box 1564, Grand Rapids, Michigan 49501, or call us at 453-0305. C also has 2 new leaflets, From Paycheck to Paycheck, about the joys of working for low wages to enrich the rich, and Globalization's Losers, the working class, about the impact of global markets on the global working class. If you would like free copies, call or write to us. Also, we're in the process of writing a we're in the process of writing a leaflet for college students. The tentative title is Bored with Classes, ? If you would like a copy of the rough draft and are willing to help us with suggestions, write to us or phone for a copy. So that's the end of the announcements, fellow workers. And have we pretty much taken care of it?
I would like to make 2 rather brief concluding remarks on the previous section.
You have our permission.
Okay. I would say that you know, one of the reasons that the reward never emerged for these team-working sacrifices is that in the last 6 to 7 years, this world economy has become much more of a reality than it was at that time. So all workers now, you know, not just the so-called Rust Belt workers, but the so-called information age workers have been completely outflanked, and there's really nowhere to stand, because just as the steel mill people were told, well, we have to be competitive, so you can't get a raise, you have to take a pay cut, you can't have retirement because we've spent your pension too bad. All of that stuff, you know, including, you know, no reductions in medical care, et cetera, are happening to supposedly the precious workers of the Corps. I mean, and at this point. The other thing that I would say is that you can really see the viciousness of all of this by a statement that Charles Handy makes, which makes perfect sense in terms of what we've been talking about. And he says that the workers in the new economy, especially these core workers that are being worked twice as hard, they need to be retired out by the time they're approximately 40, because you need people who are like, go, 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 because they're terrified, and then they're working like hell.
Karl Marx made
He says we may
a good
call
worker
it,
is worn off at age 40.
in fact, he says, in a direct quote, that in America they probably call it age discrimination, but he says, well, you know, I'm British, I can say it like it is, you know, this is what you've got to do.
Well, and Mark, the reason why they have to get rid of these people by 40 is because perhaps by that time they have achieved a little bit of monetary gain here, and they're in fact making too much money. So therefore we have to retire them out to the glue factory or to the pasture or wherever we put our disposable workers, and get in a 20 or a 22-year-old that we could hire in for half the price.
Well, there are illusory benefits.
The older you get, the mouthier and sassier you get. They don't like that either.
Yeah, they don't like that. They like the meek, pliable, flexible 22-year-old that they can shape and mold and tell them anything and they will believe anything.
You have something invested in the company, like Eunice was saying. You may feel some loyalty by a time that you've stayed 5-10 years, and you might be opinionated. You know, plus you might have stock options that would enable you to talk to the shareholders and say, what this guy is doing isn't good for the overall good of the company. There were a lot of people crushed when Jack Welch sold the appliance subsidiary, or their main business. A lot of employees were just shocked that they put in,
GE.
and it was successful, it was profitable. It was a strategic decision to go into medical imaging and with a vengeance and join with I believe, French medical imaging firm instead of keeping the appliance firm in the U.S. So the more I read this book by him, people should go back and look at it. It wasn't written more than 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It was a shock because I'd been sort of buying into a lot of what the business press was saying. And then suddenly I realized there was even more to it than they've been telling us.
Of course, the old original seed of the business, the appliances, is where the older, more experienced workers
That's right. They had a lot of traditional people that believed in a traditional type of organization, too, and couldn't figure out what was happening.
We have 8 topics here, fellow workers, and so far we've covered 1.
All right, I'll behave from now on.
I don't know, that doesn't speak well for our efficiency as a team, does it?
Frank, you don't have to be all that efficient tonight.
Okay. Well, the next one we have here is temporary workers, and I didn't put these in any kind of order because they're probably in some kind of logical progression, but I didn't keep it in mind when I was jotting these topics down. Anybody have any comments on temping and temporary workers and their place in the economy and their condition? This is a sad situation for most people.
But it's part of this strategy, again, which we can get back to our topic, management strategy, because it's called supplier alliances. And they're recommending that, say, a company like Ford get fewer and fewer suppliers so that it can interact and trade design ideas with one company, excluding all other suppliers. I mean, it's really a strategy. Similarly, excluding all sorts of open applicants for jobs, narrowing it down to one temporary company. So I couldn't believe it that it was tied in with the, auto companies supplying, the company that supplies parts to the auto companies. It's just like part of the same strategy that we don't want the market. Basically, they admit that they're going outside of the market, which I think this point should be made, because I think anybody who thinks we're working with a book should realize this is a definite blue book of let's get around the capitalist market. So they shouldn't, pretend that we're criticizing capitalism. We're criticizing not playing by the rules that exist right now and not changing them, by a democratic means.
Well, the seminal thinker, Charles Handy, says that society, and you could conceive of the corporation in reality as composed of three leaves. You have your core, which is your most important leaf of this shamrock or clover. You have temporary workers that are a supply that can be expanded and contracted according to business conditions. And then you have 30% of the people that, they'll be janitors or hamburger flippers or whatever. Essentially those are the people who can't compete, and it's too bad, but they're going to have terrible poverty to deal with. But in terms of temporaries, the thing is that according to this logic of this situation, the core will continually shrink more and more to the point where it's the CEO and a few of his cronies and some consultants. But the tendency is for everyone to become the temporary worker, it seems.
May I
Well,
comment?
I'm sure they'd like to see us in that kind of a nervous situation. When I was doing the announcement, I was supposed to end by saying that we were opening the phone lines and asking people who are interested to call in. Our number is 459-4881, and you're welcome. We welcome you to participate in this discussion. Give us a call and raise your questions or make your points or whatever it is, and we'll hear you, and you'll be a part of the discussion. So,
as the team workers develop greater efficiency for the CEO, they're undercutting their position and doing themselves in so that essentially they fall into that category of the contingent workforce, the people who will be spun off or laid off and brought back as a temporary, as far as I can see it. I mean, it seems to be how the theory works from the CEO standpoint.
But one comment that I'd like to make that's related to this, the temporary workers, is I read in the paper a lot nowadays, in 1997, that there is a tremendous shortage of highly skilled technical workers. And I kind of smile and scratch my head and remember back in the early 90s, and then I pick up papers like USA Today, and I see that L. Dunlop has slashed 12,000 jobs at Sunbeam, and the next day's paper, we have more layoffs. So the layoffs have not stopped. They probably never will. Then I ask myself, how could there be a shortage of high-tech skilled workers here when these workers that are getting laid off are some of the high-tech skilled workers? It just isn't logical to me. So I think about this. And one of the things that I see why there is a pseudo shortage of skilled high-tech workers is that, again, corporations and employers, why they perpetrated the layoffs in the first place was not to get a smaller workforce, but to get a cheaper workforce. So therefore, keeping that in mind, we now have a cheaper workforce, but we still need help because we laid off all of these people to do the work. And some of the slaves are objecting to do twice as much work, for half the pay, what we were talking about just previously.
Charles Handy.
So we go out, Charles Handy, and we go out and we try to find new, highly skilled technical workers to hire into the company. The problem is that you are not going to find a highly skilled technical worker that has 20 years of experience that might be able to do your corporation some good at $20,000 a year. So my theory here is that there's a pseudo shortage simply because the corporations will not belly up to the bar here and pay the going rate of what these highly skilled workers require.
But if they're between jobs, they might go to a high-tech temporary firm
Exactly.
and take the 20,000 on a temporary basis. That's what
So
I'm reading on
they
the
can-
internet, that actually people are trying to sell these temporarily displaced, experienced information services people on this more career self-reliance, and also on working with this temp firm who doesn't divulge how much they're actually getting for their hourly rate, usually, like we said, 50 to 100% more than they're paid. I mean,
Right.
it's been documented. If any worker wants to look at internet ads for temp firms, they're now getting more specific that we pay $6 and we charge you 12, you know, so that's a 100% markup. So I'm sure it's happening
Yeah.
with the information worker. But so they think they're
sure.
only doing it while they're between jobs, and that's fine, but it's also cheapening the workforce for,
Oh, definitely.
for the
You
companies.
know what fits in here in terms of cheapening the workforce is the tremendous amount of resources, I suppose spearheaded by the president in his bully pulpit, you know, among other things, calling for, you know, a computer in every classroom, on every desk, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what they're doing is they're going, I mean, at this moment, for years to come, we're creating this tremendous oversupply of such workers at the expense of those people who will never find, you know, careers in that field, because another part of what Handy and Welch and all these people are saying is that there are going to be fewer and fewer and fewer jobs in the future. And yet they're creating this tremendous supply of this type of worker so that they can undercut the pay of the ones that they cherry pick out of that mass.
Mark, we have a caller. Josie, are you there?
Josie.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm sorry, I can't hear you through my phone. That's what I was expecting. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm finding your program very interesting. I can truly empathize with some of your viewpoints as I'm catching onto your viewpoints about the importance of equality, economic equality. However, one point I'd like to add to the pool of thought is that we all also have freedom of choice in this country. And that if a person does feel that he or she is not getting a fair shake, he or she can leave that job and perhaps start their own company. And I think that's something to also take into consideration, that companies aren't here to take care of us. And you're right, there are very unfair conditions out there, and there are rotten people out there. And so, but we can choose to leave and make our own way also. And I think that we need to realize that we have a lot of power as individuals to do those things. So those are my thoughts on that.
I'd like to make a point, though, in connection with this. It's true that we have the freedom to leave an employer, but at the same time, you know, it isn't quite that free. If we're getting a bad shake, if there's another job out there, fine. We can look for another job. But ordinarily, you're not going to find anything that's an awful lot better. You're not going to find anything that's an awful lot better. You know, job wages tend to be about the same. Bosses tend to be about the same. And the fact is that as working people, we have to find a master. Isn't that right, Josie?
To find a master?
You have to find somebody that will employ you.
Well,
So if you're not working for this son of a gun, you've got to find another son of a gun to work for. Isn't that so, Josie?
I agree with you that we all need a customer. For instance,
A customer?
A customer, you bet. I mean, we all have them, right? If you work for a company, you have internal customers. These are people that you need to satisfy to help them to accomplish their objectives. To give you an example, I work with a training company right now.
A training company?
Yep.
Go ahead.
And I can leave that company to form my own company if I wanted to. All I need to do is find customers and find people who will pay me for talents that I have. And if I can find people who are willing to do that, then that's all I need. And really, all of us in this world have talents, skills, abilities that we market. And in a way, each of us is our own little company. When we go to work for big companies, we're truly selling our talents and skills to that company as a buyer. And so I need to take personal responsibility to make sure that I'm a talented person, that no matter where I go, what I do, I'm always updating my skills so that I can sell it to the buyer that I want to sell it to. And that even includes a customer that I want to work with, because as you point out, very astutely, there are some rotten customers out there. I mean, I've had employers who were rotten.
I think customer is a strange word to use. Most of us have to look for a boss, and we're not. I suppose you could say that they're a customer, but really a boss we hire in, and then we proceed to do exactly what we're told to do. And we don't deviate an awful lot from what we're told to do, or we find ourselves out the door.
I would say that through monopoly,
I don't think you're selling your talents. They just use you in whatever way they find useful.
I would say that through monopoly collusion, you know, in terms of this customer thing, the bottom is falling out of the market in a big way. And, you know, the standard of living in the U.S. has been falling for 25 years, and all of these, you know, social, great social philosophers, these business gurus, are saying that, well, that's great, and because, you know, like this guy who came to Grand Rapids in 1990, Irwin Jacobs, who spoke to the Economic Club of Grand Rapids. His speech was covered in the GR Press. His nickname is Irv Liquidator. He started out his speech saying that the scariest thing he's ever seen in his life are, at that time, the current conditions of a falling standard of living, you know, throughout society. You know, greater competition in the world that drives, you know, the standard of living ever lower in the U.S. But then he said, you know, although this is very scary, he said, but this is the greatest opportunity that business ever had. You know, it was the best thing in the world, and you've got to take advantage of it, and that was his real point. And I say this is all really, you know, a manipulated process. You have people, you know.
We've got another caller, Josie.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Am I out now, or
I hope you
do I
call
stay
again.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome.
Tim, are you there?
Yes.
Comment.
My comment was, it seems that the free market that really has made the American GNP #1 in the world has its benefits, and it has a few drawbacks also. But by and large, I would have to say that it seems to be the best system in the world. You guys seem like you don't agree with that.
You know,
Is there another country that you would like to?
May I show this, please?
Do you like to say that is better than ours?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say there was another country that's better than ours. But for one thing, I don't know any country that has anything except the market system. Capitalism and the market system are pretty much global by now. So you have capitalism all over the world. And you also have capitalism and the market system in countries where people are starving to death, in which children go hungry. The thing about the market system is that it's great for people who are wealthy. They have something to sell on the market ordinarily, whatever it is that they sell, and they have the wherewithal to buy. But for most of us, the only thing we bring to the market is ourselves, our bodies, our lives. And the 95% of us have to run ourselves out by the day and the hour and the week in order to live. And for us, the market system is a pretty poor thing. It's great for billionaires and millionaires and capitalists and the upper level of management. It's not very good for those of us who actually have to go to work and actually do the work in this world, you know? Like do the cooking and the waitressing and lay the bricks and build the furniture and do all those, do the writing and the press work and all those things that have to be done, Tim.
That's the way
where do you fit into the market, Tim? Are you selling your life in order to live? Is that what you have to market?
Actually, no.
Well,
I used to do that.
What?
I used to do that.
You used to do that?
I used to do that.
Now you're running the slaves, is that it, Tim?
No, that's not the case. But that's the way, I have to say that's the way it's always going to be. You're always going to have a few people who are the rulers and the billionaires, so to speak, and you're always going to have the rest of the people who have to clean the toilets and mop the floors and cook the meals. But
those are useful members of society. Melanie, you had a point to make in connection with this?
This is the latest thing that...
My point is, I think you guys seem to, I don't know, you seem to want more, but I think that you have to realize that we are the most affluent somebody said that the standard of living has been going down for the past 25 years. That's wrong. The standard of living is going up.
That's right. You know, twice as many people are working since women entered the workforce, and yet you have two-parent families that have to struggle to try and keep together the same income that, you know, one parent was making 30 years ago.
Well,
so you've got to take that into consideration. Melanie had a point to make.
Well, I hope people see the relation to this, because I was surprised that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on right now with this globalization, which means a lot of different things to the players, and the market is being gone around. That might explain why our salaries have stayed the same for 6 years. You know, $6 an hour being the average for a low-wage worker. That's phenomenal that it stayed that way for 6 years, since '89 or so, 7 or 8 years. They feel that employers have been interfering with the market, setting a wage, either colluding, hiring through agents that set the wage, like the temp firms. And also here is a very clear explanation in all these current global business. This is a book praised by global business leaders, The Connected Corporation, and they show how alliances are much more efficient for them than the market at cutting costs. So these people are actually violating our antitrust laws. We're trying to point out that there's something very aberrant going on in the market. These are all features of it, and I really think people ought to get aware of it.
I definitely agree that we should protect our borders and protect our high standard of living here in America. We shouldn't export jobs and try to make the third world countries as affluent as we are, because we're going to be dragged down in the process.
But we are doing that, Tim.
I agree.
We are doing that
that's the
to
situation I
a
agree
great
with.
extent. Did you ever read a fellow named Mike Royko? He's dead now.
I read him.
He was
I read him a
Chicago
lot. Yes.
Writer, and one of his articles, I don't have it here with me, but he came to the conclusion, and I agree with it, that it was greed that made this country as great as it is.
And he's right.
It was pure greed.
Definitely.
You know, I would say, what's the good of a big GNP if it's going to a shrinking minority of persons, which it is? And also, I'd say, what's the good of a booming economy if it's producing increasing poverty for most of the people in society? And even these business gurus, you know, say that, well, that's true, but they say, well, that's good, you know, and it's kind of like, well, the patient died, but the operation was a great success.
I certainly don't think that it's increasing poverty for more and more people. I think that I don't know where you get your numbers, but I think that we're doing quite well as a matter of fact. As far as look at the deficit, it's at 29 billion. It's the lowest since 1974. The economy is doing very well. If you want to get into socialist programs and communist programs, as far as everybody is equal, well then I think that seems to be the way that your rhetoric is headed. You don't seem like you want to acknowledge that competition and greed, so to speak, are the driving forces that make America great.
You know, I think you're a bit off there, Tim. Did you ever stop to think that what really works in this society and what makes it work is cooperation? Millions of people working together to produce things and do all these things. That's not competition. If there were competition on the shop floor, you'd never get an automobile made. Competition is something that goes on in the upper levels among these swine that own this country. They compete with each other and that sort of thing. But we people who do the work of this world work together, and we do a good job of it. And if that gang wasn't running the show, we could do an awful lot. We'd have plenty for everybody. But you know, we've got to sign off. We've got to go on to another topic. Tim, and I hope you call again, and we've enjoyed discussing this.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me.
Bye, Tim.
Bye-bye.
And you know, one of the things that we were going to talk about was computers and computer skills.
Yes.
And some of us, two of us at least, are authorities in this field and have something to say. So you want to start off, Eunice?
Well, a principal part of downsizing and restructuring in organizations and corporations is the use of high technology and computers which replace human labor. And I would like to talk about how the same trend is becoming a driving force in our schools. At a time when state aid to schools is being cut and school systems are struggling to find ways to provide good teachers, keep classes small, keep buildings maintained, provide educational materials, such as books. Corporations are providing millions of dollars of computer systems to schools. It's been widely assumed that computers provide a wealth of educational material that easily and efficiently replaces books. But there's a growing number of experts that are challenging that assumption and actually finding that computers, despite their glamour and glitz, are not enhancing student achievement in a manner that was initially hoped for. In fact, there's a growing concern amongst some researchers that spending time on a computer has some serious repercussions in the development of a child's brain by exercising mainly the left hemisphere of the brain, which is the part of the brain that it presents material in a way that flattens information into a narrow sequential data. And the left brain deals with sequential data very well, but the right brain is not being stimulated, it seems. Yet this is a side of the brain which works on creative analysis and shapes multifaceted impressions. To make matters worse, computer technology education is replacing subjects like art and music, which preliminary studies indicate can actually enhance and enlarge a child's brain and make the brain function better in areas of language, science, math, and engineering. Other things that are being replaced are tech ed, and replaced by tech ed are SHOP, which provides hands-on activities for children. Most of those activities are being replaced with computer education classes. Field trips are also threatened. In a recent poll, most teachers agreed that computer skills and media technology were more essential than the study of European history, biology, chemistry, and physics. More important than dealing with social problems, learning practical job skills, or studying literature, despite the sketchy evidence that computers really enhance scholastic achievement. It's becoming obvious that with programs like Channel One and philanthropic contributions of high-tech equipment to schools, that corporate America has their eyes on American school children as future workers and future consumers. This makes a lot of sense in what you were saying, Mark, about providing a very large technical workforce that's easily dispensed with. Young people traditionally will work for lower wages, and I think that's what is being calculated here. The challenge is to not let our schools become corporate training centers. The problems of tomorrow are vast and complicated and will require creativity and problem-solving skills. Corporations, by their nature, are profit-motivated, and it's not realistic to expect them to have too much to do with solving the problems that are facing this world. What will be required is people who have a full capacity of their minds with creativity and analytical problem-solving skills. Today, we have to get past the glamour of computers and take a serious look at if they are really enhancing our minds or dulling them, and step back and analyze corporations and high-tech role in our school systems.
There's even some question on the corporate level about the value of computers. Have you read any of that? For one thing, they go bad all the time, and you have to replace them. But incidentally, before we go any farther, I'd like to remind people that this is a call-in program. We welcome your calls at 459-4881. Join the discussion of the condition of the working class in 1997. And Ms. Channing, go ahead.
Yes. Having worked with computers all of my adult life, first of all, I don't think computers are glamorous. I don't think they're glitzy. I don't think they're sexy. They are a machine to enable us to process and sort and classify large amounts of data. When I first started working with computers, there was no such term as computer science. You know what it was called? It was called data processing. And you know what it still is? It's data processing. We have glitzed it, we have glamorized it. I don't quite know why. I'll have to think about that a moment. But computers do have a place in our society, again, as I said, for processing large amounts of data. And I would certainly want my child to have some exposure to a computer during their school But I think it's way overemphasized. I think we've gone overboard here with President Clinton saying that we need a computer on every desk in every classroom. I mean, this is totally ridiculous. We don't need a computer on every desk in every classroom for every student. They need a little bit of exposure to it. Plus, secondly, computers are not that difficult to learn how they operate. I mean, it really isn't all that much of a mystique or anything like that. They're quite logical. It's quite easy to understand how a computer operates.
And ordinarily we're not called on to program them, are we? Kids don't learn how to program computers, do they? That's a technical word.
Probably not. I wouldn't think they would be teaching that in elementary or in high school. It's strictly as an end user, you know, moving the mouse around, how to point and click, which might give the child some hand-eye coordination to do that. But as far as how the computer actually works, that's not taught in school at all. Now, whether it should be or not, I question that too, as was said, that we don't want to use our schools as a corporate training ground.
Okay, Melanie, your comments on this?
Well, I was thrilled to hear what Eunice said, because I'd talked to a teacher just the week before who'd said that she found that use of computers interfered with other things. I wasn't thinking of it as replacing. I was thinking it as an additional learning. I didn't think of how much it would be replacing in the school day. And part of the problem for this teacher was that complained at a seminar was just working with each student who might have a technical problem using the mouse or the equipment, and that interfered with her attention to other students in their learning. So I don't know whether they're going to get assistants along with the computers to work in place of the teacher.
Right, and not only that, but corporations, after they initially contribute the computers, often abandon the project, and the school is left with the burden of maintaining them, and that's very expensive. And it takes a lot of skill. And running them and running the really, maybe the few very educational programs that could actually enhance education often requires expensive software that is not available and a lot of skill in running them, especially when you get into the internet and conferencing on the internet, teleconferencing and stuff like that. That's very expensive, but that is probably one of the more educational applications of computers.
Are companies providing that, filling that void, this expensive software?
No. No.
Or giving the teachers
No,
training?
only in very, very high-tech schools, which are few and far between, that are designed to be very technical.
I was I was teaching at the time computers came into the schools, and I'll tell you, the people who were running the schools, the administrators just went bonkers. They thought they had the greatest. They thought they had the magic card that will
Yeah.
All they are, I'm not going to say all they are because it's pretty important, but they're a wonderful way of producing documents. Incidentally, we have another caller on the line. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, how you doing?
Just fine. And comment or question or?
Well, I heard you say that the computers, you know, it seems to take the teacher additional time to work with the computers, but my daughter's 4 years old and my other daughter's 6 years old, and they go to Harrison Park School, and they get on those computers and they have no problem at all. You know, it seems like the younger they introduce these computers to the kids, the better off they're going to be later on in life.
What do they use them for, Mike? Are they typing
Well, they're only 4 and 6, so they're like learning pronunciation and different things like that. So
I see.
it's pretty neat.
Be careful about the reading programs. The reading programs particularly have shown that after 6 months of usage, there's a 50% drop in creativity. There's no question that computers have their place and can enhance education, but they are starting to show that they do not stimulate the whole brain, and especially for young children, this is of growing concern.
Well, I noticed half the program was learning her words and numbers, and then the other half was coloring or making shapes or doing shapes on the computer. So I think you're wrong when you say they don't teach creativity, because they can go in and use whatever color, whatever size paintbrush, or, you know, different things like that.
Yeah, there's the brain in young children is programmed by using both hands in physical movements, and the computer is limited in that way too. I don't think computers are bad in small doses, but if a child is mostly relying on that, and it's fun. I mean, a lot of kids really love computers.
Well, they don't rely on it. I mean, that's only like 20 minutes of the day that they use a computer.
Yeah.
I know in just preschool. She's
Yeah.
just in preschool. Later on in life, if they do it, you know, I'm sure they don't even do it more than an hour a day for the older kids. I mean, just a little bit to go on and do a little hands-on isn't going to hurt them, because every business nowadays, every place of business has a computer in it. You know, and it's just a matter of time before it's just going to take over everything. You know, and you say no, but I have a funny feeling that it's going to, if we like it or not.
Yeah, I agree that people do have to learn how to use computers, kids do, but it really cannot take over, and there's a growing number of people who are, kids especially, who are almost addicted to computers and spend a large amount of time on them.
There seems to be evidence to suggest that use of computers is reducing the ability for children to think critically, really. I mean, it's processing information, but it's very, flat and literal. It's not promoting critical thought. Critical thought test scores are apparently going way down.
Well, it can't be any better than just watching TV all the time either.
Well,
I agree. To me, it's kind of similar to that. These kids that you hear about, the 6th graders that surf the internet, for 4 hours every night.
We have
What's the difference between that and sitting in front of the television set for 4 hours?
Well, that's
Mike, we have about
Yeah.
15 seconds to credits.
So thanks a lot.
Appreciate
Bye.
your
Yeah, thanks
call,
for
and we're going to have to wind it up. If anybody here got 5 seconds to say, worth of something to say? You mean we're at a loss for words? Is this the end of it?
I think it's the end.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not live, is it?